Hey listeners, just a heads up that this episode contains some heavier stuff. There's talk of violence and even murder. Please listen with caution. Did you ever dare to keep kids like yourself off drugs?
Is a foundational TV memory of yours watching a white Bronco speed down a California freeway?
If you lost sleep as a teen wondering what happened to Kristen Smart, you might be a Xennial, and we are too. Hi, I'm Katie.
And I'm Danny, and welcome everyone to Generation In Between, a Xennial Podcast, where we remember, we revisit, and we relearn all kinds of things from our 80s childhoods and 90s teen and young adulthoods.
Yes, and today we've got part 2 of our two-parter for you on true crime of the 80s and 90s. If you missed part 1, we covered true crime of the 1980s, some of the bigger cases, as well as some of the social issues that led to an increase in violent crime in America. Today, we're just going to roll right into the 90s with some social commentary, as well as 5 cases, at least, who knows, may have a few more that come to mind as we go, that really shaped the true crime of the decade. And Danny, I am looking at you. You are still here. I am surprised. How are you feeling halfway through this true crime series?
Well, so usually I will listen back to our episodes once we air them, just to I don't love listening to are you like that? Do you like to hear your own voice?
Not really, but I'm the same way. I will listen to them.
I like to listen back because I want to, if people ask me a question or something, because I don't remember, we don't remember what we talk about sometimes, even though we have notes and all the things. And sometimes I just want to see how stuff lands.
Yeah.
And this one, I made it through halfway and I had to turn it off. And I was like, the first one, not this current one, obviously, because I can't listen in the future.
Yes.
But I listened halfway. I was like, okay, I can't. I don't like true crime. I don't want to do it. But I am still here.
Yay. And we just had our little workout.
We did. But it is morning. It is a weekday. It is morning. Katie and I both have work to do as the day goes by. So I'm not on Zoom in my house drinking wine. So this one might be a little harder to swallow. Literally.
Yes, because coffee's hot and wine just goes down so smooth, you guys. Okay, well, really quick before we start, a little life catch up, I think, and a podcast catch up. So, a lot of things in the works. We are actively working on our website, getting that looking amazing.
Yes, we have a photo session we are trying to schedule. That's when our website will debut, because we have to have these
amazing pictures that you all, oh my gosh, it's going to be great.
It's going to be great. Well, we have to get that done, and finding time where Katie and I have a few hours to go take pictures is almost impossible. Yes, but we will have some merch up there. We're doing our website through Squarespace. We're just giving them free advertising if they ever find us.
Yeah, Squarespace. If you say it enough and it's in the transcript, they might find us.
Oh my God, that'd be great. And they have a partnership with a company where you can just automatically print stuff and it's linked to your website. So we're going to try that. I have a friend who owns her own screen printing business and I'd much rather support her. But we're going to try this first just to get our feet wet and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. And speaking of cool merch and pictures and things we're working on, just a reminder, because a few people lately have been surprised that we are on Patreon, because we mentioned at the end of the show, but yes, we are on Patreon. And if you don't know what that is, it's a platform basically where podcasters and other creators can monetize their content if they want without having to do ads. I'm not saying we'll never do ads, but this is
because we just name drop.
Because we just name drop, but we did not get paid for that.
That's true.
Yet,
unfortunately.
If this is 2027 and the beginning of our episode had an ad for Squarespace, you know what happened.
Right.
But when we're recording this in 2024,
right,
they are not a sponsor. But Patreon. So it's $8 a month because we're 80s babies, and we always do an after show.
Yep.
We sometimes do extra trivia on there. We might do a Mad Libs bonus there. If we have guests, they stick around. And that's when our guests usually have great expertise. But on the after show is where we ask them maybe more, I don't want to say personal stuff, but things about their life. and they open up about more things on the after show. So we've got some really interesting content there.
Yep.
You can also join Patreon for free. You don't get access to that bonus content, but you'll see announcements we have on merchandise and things like that. So I think our patrons also will get first dibs on things like merchandise and discounts and things like that.
And hey, we have only had like a little handful of patrons. Thank you so much so far. But guess what, guys? Your money paid for us to start our website. We bought our domain. Generation in Between is now a .com.
It is.
So that is what that money, Katie was like, I was like, okay, how are we going to pay for this? And she's like, oh, wait, hold on. We have money in our Patreon. I was like, okay.
We did.
So that was awesome. So that was the first thing that we got, like a big cost.
A big cost that we were able to use that for.
Yeah.
And obviously that benefits everyone who listens because they'll get to see our website. But yeah, so just a reminder, we have that. And also for completely free, we have our amazing neon leopard print Generation in Between stickers.
Yeah, we still have some if y'all want some.
Still do. If you would like one, you can email us, generationinbetweenpodcast@gmail.
Dumbest email. I'm so sorry. I don't
Danny
know.
was in charge of that project.
I don't remember what happened, but it's so bad.
And anyways, I don't know what else we would call it.
I think because Generation in Between was already taken.
Yeah, it was.
Isn't that weird?
So don't email those people. They will not send you a sticker.
What if people have been emailing them like episode ideas and like, can I have a sticker? And these people are like, what? Funny email story. There was this guy who lived in Africa who had almost the same email address as me.
What?
And he would get emails. I didn't know this for a long time, but it was different by like one letter or something. And one time I don't know how he figured out my real email address, but he was like, he messaged me. It was like, I think this is yours. I keep getting emails from you.
Oh my gosh, there's Courtney in
It's
Africa.
wild.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, that's my old email
Honestly,
address.
maybe we should email generationinbetween@gmail and just be like, hey.
Maybe we should.
Maybe we should and just see like what's happening, or just do like a Google reverse search, see if we can find who they are. Let's do it.
Because who is it?
I don't know.
Who's out there?
Who's out there?
I don't know. Or you
It's
can
not
message us too. You can send us a DM on our socials
Yeah.
as well.
We'll
Lots
mail it right to you.
lots of people send us messages on Insta. So
Yeah.
that seems to be our most pop-in place.
It's popping off over there.
Listen to me.
Look out. Look out. Also, when you said we are a .com, I was like, I wanted to be like, welcome to the 2000s.
I know.
Way to go. All right. So
Okay.
all of that is happening. We won't get too much into it now, but we both started rehearsals this week. We were both cast in A Christmas Story, the musical with the
Yes.
Henniger. So it's our vocal week, and our voices, it's Thursday morning. Our voices sound pretty good. Is your voice tired?
I mean, it's tired, but
Mhm.
you know, I'm also just physically tired going to
Mhm.
bed so late. So we don't get home till after 11, and then I have to get Cooper up before 7. And I mean, we get home at 11, but that's not when you go straight to sleep, right? You
Of course.
shower and you do the things, and so I'm just physically tired. And plus, I'm
Mhm.
amped. Are you amped when you get home?
I am. And so like I stopped drinking into 2024. Like I've had 2 drinks
Mhm.
all year. Yeah.
With me.
The first one after months of not drinking was with Danny at 90s Fest.
I'm
But
very privileged for that, though.
yeah, but it was good and it was fun.
It was delicious.
And then the second was I went to dinner with my husband maybe 2 weeks ago. And
Yeah.
he didn't get a drink, but I was like, I'm gonna get a glass of wine.
and it's so delicious.
And I
when
knew
it's
he
like-
was driving, and it was
Yeah.
a nice seafood dinner, so it was
Yeah.
fantastic. But all that to say, I was remembering because I was in last year's Christmas show
Yeah.
that I would come home super amped and I would drink a glass of wine or two.
Show you down.
And so now I'm just like, and so instead we've been watching NCIS, these very like calming things. I know. I'm weird. I think my husband would prefer not to watch any of that, but he's just like,
Is he still awake when you get home?
oh yeah. Well, he's a night owl.
Oh, okay.
He also doesn't like he's actively changed his patterns because of family life. Like he can't be up all night. He has
Right.
to be up early to like get people out the door and get himself to work, like working. But like when we had the hurricane, well, that's the other thing. We had a hurricane last week. That's why we were in Zoom. He stayed up all night.
Yeah, I
No
did too.
problem.
No, I had a problem, but I stayed up. I'm not a night owl. I'm a morning person, but I'm not a super early morning person like I used to be. But anyway, it is hard. And Cooper's 12 and he has to be up before 7, get ready for school, and
That's a
he's
lot.
with me at rehearsals. And anyway, physically I'm tired. My voice is okay.
Yeah. So we'll tell you guys more about that.
when
we
we
do
get
have
closer.
on our socials, we do have the cats announcement posted, and then in our stories I've posted like how to get tickets if you're local and you want to come see Danny and I in this show, and we'll be posting more on that.
And my kid.
Oh yeah,
because he's
rowdy. So the cats, you were
oh my gosh, everybody's so fantastic,
so good.
P.S. Katie, who is a super qualified first soprano princess singer, is singing 3 parts. Like she's singing soprano, second soprano, and alto on some songs. So she is like a multitask, amazingly talented.
Not all at
voice.
The same time, but yes.
Yeah, not all at once.
I don't know how to do that yet.
So it's really fun. It's fun to hear because I only know you as like a first soprano, and I'm hearing her do all this fun stuff, and I'm like, go Katie, she's so talented. I have one range, and that is all I can do.
Look, guys, Danny is like a lead in this show, though. She's crazy. She has at least 2 solos. Do you have more than that? And
I sing with Chris a few times, but not
the dad, the old man.
He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's good.
But I will preface this. I am not a traditional lead, everyone. And we can talk more about this on another episode. So I have lots of imposter syndrome right now because my voice is not a standard lead voice, and that's okay for this role. Like it's okay. But anyway.
I mean, every show, and I'll say this and then we'll move on, right?
We're going to talk about scary stuff.
I feel like you're stalling, Danny, but it's cool. I will say every show has different characters.
That's true.
And you need different voices and different types of people. So your voice and characterization and who you are as a performer is perfect for this role.
Yeah.
And maybe you're not going to be Ariel in The Little Mermaid.
Shock? What? I'm not.
Sorry. Maybe you are. I was thinking neither of us would, no matter what our voices are.
Well, we could do it. We could do middle-aged,
aged out.
I could probably do Ursula, though.
You could do Ursula.
But I wouldn't. Well, she has some belty moments. I just wouldn't belty that.
You wouldn't belty it. You just villainize. Anyway, that is a good
that's good.
segue.
That's a good segue.
Speaking of villains, let's get into true crime of the 90s. Okay. So Danny has no notes in front of her because I'm going to ask her some questions as we go. But of course, as always, I want to hear your take on a lot of the things we're talking about here.
Okay.
All right. So we talked last time how the 1980s had this record high crime rate, particularly for violent crime and property crimes. And we also had this discussion about how accurate is it? Was it really worse, or was it more things being reported, policing harder, so therefore there were more arrests? Who knows? But at least on paper, crime was higher in the 1980s than it had been any other time in American history. Now, again, on paper, that starts to taper off in the 1990s, which is what we're going to talk about today. However, that cultural shift that sort of happened in the 80s, that violence was just more of an accepted part of American life, was still there. So I have this combination of some crime statistics on the 90s. I had a few for the 80s, so I went back and found some more. I have these from 2 sources, the Brennan Center for Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the U.S. Bureau. Okay, so violent crime rates, they peaked in the 80s. However, so this makes sense, right? Because it's not like a clean slate when a decade starts. Right. It's not like it's 1990, everything's new. Everything that's happening before it rolls right in. So the highest year for violent crime in the U.S. in the decade of the 90s was 91, which makes sense. And that was with 716 violent crimes per 100,000 people, which, if you remember from the last episode, it was somewhere in the 800s. So it's lower, but that was the highest it got in the 90s at the beginning. But after that, violent crime really did drop. Some stats say it dropped by nearly 50% by the end of the decade. Depending which sources you read, there's a lot of reasons for that, right? People were more aware of their personal safety. So, homes were being locked, cars were being locked, people were walking in groups. The crack cocaine epidemic was waning. It wasn't as, again, this is all perception,
I know,
as out of control as it was perceived in the 80s. And then, some people say policing strategies improved. Right. So
I have a lot of
improved is kind of a loaded word for that. But just based on what I just said, the reasons people give, what are your thoughts?
Well, while you're talking, something that I always think about that we touched on a little bit, and obviously I don't have any research in front of me, but just on past research that I've done for other things or just information I know, there is a very interesting correlation though with, racial targeting when it comes to arrests. And I think about, rise in crime. Well, who's being arrested and why? And, which goes back to the 80s. And then the whole crack cocaine thing, something that we didn't talk about last time that I'm thinking about now. It was very interesting because the people who were being arrested were not the majority of people who were using cocaine the most, because who was using cocaine the most? Upper middle class, rich white people.
Mm-hmm.
They just were getting in trouble for it. So, and that is a statistic I can't really quote for because it's not in front of me, but so that doesn't really pertain to what you're talking about. It does, but it doesn't. I was thinking at the same time, statistics are so interesting because even when they're quote unquote unbiased, they still can be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that statistic in and of itself is not biased because it's literally just telling you reported crimes were down X amount, from the end of this year. But then if you dig deeper and think about it, it's well, what is happening? And then improved police practices, what does that mean? I always question authority, especially authorities, systems of authority that are rooted in inequality.
Yeah.
So that's all.
No, I think that's a great point. And again, say on paper, like you said, these are reported stats or whatever, right? It's, well, so similar to that, homicide trends then, right? Which do feed into violent crimes,
Sure.
But there can be violent crimes that are not homicide. So that rate peaked at 9.8 per 100,000 people in 1991. But by 1999, it had dropped to 5.7 people. So that's
scary, right?
That's still a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas the 80s were higher than that, every year of the 80s. And again, people say that the 80s ones, the homicides were largely fueled by drug-related violence and urban crime surges, which
I know.
Kind of what you just touched on.
Yeah.
Then property crime, which we said was pretty high in the 80s, was high in both decades, but it did begin to decrease more in the 1990s. Like I mentioned, maybe people, because they were aware of this rising violence and burglary and theft, were having safer practices, but also there's some other things at play here. The economy was booming in the 90s and incarceration rates were up. So those two things together, maybe that's that, I'm using air quotes, improved policing strategies. Does that just mean more people were in jail?
Yeah.
And is that better? Is that not? And but the booming economy probably has something to do with that, at least a little bit.
You know what else?
Yeah.
That is when home security things were becoming more common, like ABT, all of that. The technology didn't exist until the early 90s, late 80s. So that could be
part of it too. I'm sure it's all those things combined.
Sure.
All those things combined. So also in the 1990s, we saw the rise, not the birth of, this actually happened in the 80s, but the rise of the 24-hour news cycle. Now, this doesn't feed into crime necessarily, but this is just a different section that I did some research on about, the fascination with true crime and the rise in those types of stories. I I think we think a lot of, at least I do, of 9/11, which happened in 2001, as the rise of the 24-hour news cycle, because we're like, oh, that's when people started like demanding this. But it was actually already happening before that in the 1990s. CNN actually launched in 1980.
Yeah, my dad was a big CNN fan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he watched it a lot.
But it, it's kind of there, not like a top cable network by any means. But then it really got catapulted to prominence in the 1990s, due in big part to some of these true crime cases I'm going to talk about today. But if you think about this, before you had access to 24-hour news, which now we have it in a different way, those channels still exist, but we also have our phones and the internet and all the things. But if you look at it through the channel of before 24-hour news channels, the only way you could get news was you wait for your newspaper, which came a day after things were happening, or you watch a news program at a scheduled time.
Yeah, 5 o'clock news.
Yeah, for half hour, an hour. And that
5
was...
and 10. That's when it was, right? At 5 and 10.
5 and 10. Yeah, and sometimes I remember... even like lunchtime news sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that was a thing in the 90s. It's not a thing anymore. But so it was a very narrow scope of, if you think about it, like it's hard to imagine now.
Oh, I know.
Because we can access anything. But if you maybe you wanted to look at news from back in the day, you would literally have to go to a library and find that. You couldn't just look it up. And if you were like, it was 4:15 in the afternoon and you want to see the top news stories of the day, guess what? You have to wait till 5 or for your newspaper to come the next day. So that really started to change 80s into the 90s. And because of that, the media really began to play into that salacious side of the news. We talked last time about A Current Affair, right? Which was this sort of TMZ, Nancy Grace combined show, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like TMZ is more celebrity based.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
But it's still the same kind of delivery. Whereas like A Current Affair, might be telling you about a crime in a small town or something like that. And there's always been salacious news. We think about like some of the yellow journalism, the newspapers kind of publishing whatever. But this was sort of a different approach to that. And then also we talked about America's Most Wanted on the last episode. And this is also the era of unsolved mysteries. That launched in 87 and it wasn't popular right at first. It took a couple years.
We need a whole show on that.
We do.
And how Robert Stack terrified the dreams of young kids.
Oh my gosh, we really do. But those programs specifically, America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries, now we don't just have programs telling us what happened. We have programs asking for our engagement.
Oh, true.
We have programs
you could call and
saying, be on the lookout. If you have info, do this. Like, you've talked about people you knew that recognized people on there or had a story. And I gave some statistics last time. I think it was over 1,200 fugitives that have been caught because of America's Most Wanted. So now that kind of plays into, again, this fascination, the sort of ownership of true crime as a society that we started to develop. Because now we're part of it, right? We're being asked to help. And those shows really played into that. Also, you can't talk about the 90s without talking about technology and early internet influence, right? And information technology, which I already touched on, like having information. But also by the mid to late 90s, there were already internet chat rooms and forums cropping up specifically for true crime. And that was one of the first and most popular areas of the internet that got a lot of traffic. There was internet sleuthing. Some of it was people that were just armchair detectives,
bunch of Karens.
A bunch of Karens.
No offense to the Karens out there. Sorry that your name has been tainted.
Sorry, Karen. But some of them were family members, trying to help solve cases for their loved ones and getting information and asking for help. One of them, especially for missing people, trying to find people who maybe were assumed that they ran away and looking for people. And toward the late 1990s, this site actually in 99, Web Sleuths. Have you heard of Web Sleuths?
Okay. Girl, no, because I have a picture of crime. Why would I hear of that?
Well, I had to ask. I hear about it a lot.
Katie's like, come on, everybody knows about web sleuth.
I'm gonna send you
She's
a
like,
web sleuths chat.
she was
later.
looking at me like, so like, yeah, you've heard of web sleuths. Like, I was gonna be like, oh yeah, of course. It's just on there yesterday.
Web sleuths that still exists.
Oh, it does.
It does. And it was a platform that evolved from this culture of chat rooms.
Okay. Now I did go up in some chat rooms in the 90s.
Okay. True crime?
No.
Oh.
I was just a teenager being dumb. That's, whatever.
That's what chat
pop
rooms
groups or whatever.
are also for.
Yeah.
Yes. But this web sleuths enabled ordinary citizens to kind of engage in crime investigations. You could review public records. You could share case details. Some of the web sleuths communities have been credited with like helping move along some really high profile cases. Now this was in the 2000s, but like Casey Anthony, there was a lot of web sleuth activity around that case. It's still around. People still use it, but that started in 99. So then another thing, and I thought you might think that this is interesting, that changed a little bit in the 90s, or a lot of it, and I think we're definitely still improving, is this idea of the victims' voices. That reporting started to change a little bit into advocating more for victims and victims' rights. Victims' rights movements actually have roots in the 1970s, but in the 90s, they definitely grew. A growing number of states began adopting laws that ensured victims' participation in the justice process. Obviously, if they were a victim of homicide, then that's not the case. But other things, a lot more protections for them. It wasn't until the 1990s that we had victim impact statements.
Oh, wow.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But go ahead and explain it for...
Yeah. So victim impact statements allow victims or their families to speak directly in court about the impact of the crime. So,
Why did it take so long to have that? That just seems like, why would you not have that?
Yeah, and it's a very standard thing now.
Right.
It's not required, obviously,
right,
but it is something that victims can talk about.
Well, no, you shouldn't be forced to talk.
Yeah.
But I mean, it should be regular.
Should be regular.
Yeah.
And I think in most cases it is. They became standard practice, and they were used, one of the first places victim impact statements were used with a lot of attention was the trial of Jeffrey Dahmer, which was in the early 90s.
Yeah.
He was convicted in 91. Also, there was federal legislation in 1994. U.S. Congress passed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which included the Violence Against Women Act. That was not around until 1994. I know. It added protections for victims of domestic violence, but also earmarked federal funding for victim services and advocacy, which, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a no-brainer.
Correct.
So that all happened as well. There's also this sort of shift and boom in psychology and profiling in the 1990s. Again, crime was kind of like cut and dry before that, basically. Like the police are in charge, and if they arrest someone, they did it right. Or if someone, hurt another person, well, they're just evil and lock them up forever or whatever, obviously there's more nuance than that.
Yeah.
But it was a lot more like that. Well, now in the 90s, we get into this sort of psychological component where it became a bigger conversation in culture. The FBI's behavioral science unit was developed then, and that was popularized by Silence of the Lambs.
Oh.
Yes, Jodie Foster's character was a member of that division.
Clarice. Okay, we don't want to sound like Hannibal Lecter, but we tried.
This would be good.
We tried.
We didn't sound like Hannibal Lecter.
I mean,
yeah.
There's only one.
And even he's fake. Anthony Hopkins, sir.
Yeah, you better have that, sir.
I know. I said it at
Listen,
the end.
if I was knighted, I'd be like, everybody better be calling me sir all the time.
Me too. And I want to be sir. What is it for ladies?
You don't get to be
You're knighted or you're nothing? What is it?
You're knighted or nothing.
Okay, so
I don't know, but we need something.
We got to figure that out.
You can just call me your highness. That works.
That's
queen. Never mind.
Though. I mean, but there isn't a queen right now.
Well, I don't want to be a queen.
Oh.
I just want to be treated like one.
You just want to be called sir, okay? So like, what does she have?
No, I
to
don't
do
want to
for
be called
that?
sir. I just want to be, anyway, go ahead. So
Yes,
treat me like
okay.
royalty, but I don't want any of the responsibilities.
Correct.
Yeah. There we go.
So movies like Silence of the Lambs made criminal profiling scientific and fascinating, and people were drawn to this idea that you could understand and even predict the behavior of killers by looking into what makes them tick.
That is so scary. I would not want that job. I know you're like fascinated. I do not want to. I would be terrified to go into the mind of a serial killer.
Mhm. I mean, that's fair. So I don't know that I would. I think it is. I mentioned on the last episode that listening to true crime and sort of understanding things like profiling and psychology of crime has helped me become a more empathetic person, because you do sort of go, oh, yeah, okay, like I can see why that person would do that. Or you see the depth that mental illness can drive people to. Not always, and again, it's not an excuse, but it is fascinating in a way to understand how different brains work. I think you think it's terrifying, and
I
not
do.
fair,
I feel like I can build empathy other ways.
right? You definitely can. You definitely
I
can.
feel like I don't need to know what's happening in
Right.
Jeffrey brain.
No, I'm gonna leave that one alone. Yeah. So there was also this shift toward evidence-based profiling in the 90s.
What is
So that's more structured approaches, data from crime scenes, victimology, behavior, formalized crime models, right? So we do think of like in court, oh, you have to prove it, right? You have to have evidence, you have to have whatever.
And until proven guilty, right? That's how our court.
Right. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to be.
Well,
but it just became a little bit more systematic in the 90s, like the types of ways you needed to prove things, and also, you know, DNA research was coming a long way.
You about to say Danny research?
Danny research. I'm looking right at you. How can I say DNA?
I know.
That's almost your full name, sort of.
What? No, it's not.
DN is missing one letter.
True.
But it's out of order. Wow. Okay. So
I don't know what's happening today.
There's more of that and more behavioral analysis, which we kind of talked about. And then, as I just sort of touched on, integration with forensic science.
Oh, yeah.
Right. A lot more. We can prove you were there, or we can prove you weren't there. That sort of thing. That's not just looking for circumstantial evidence. Of course, physical evidence has always been a part of the process, but the kind of advancement of that was pretty rapid in the 90s.
Okay.
And even for things like cold cases. So it's kind of cool. All right. So those are the basic cultural, societal things that I researched. But now we're going to get into some cases from the 90s.
Great.
But first, I have a little aside, and I may do a full episode on this.
More? We're going to do more,
but not next week.
That's it. I'm bringing in more weird cartoons. That's it.
We'll see.
I'm just kidding. We'll do it.
We won't do it next week. Don't worry. It'll be later. But so where I grew up, there's a relatively known case that took place as I was a youth in the 90s that I've listened to on a few true crime podcasts. So if you're a true crime person, you've probably heard of it. If you're like an average person who grew up in Louisiana, you probably haven't.
Who doesn't like true crime?
Which is Danny. It was the disappearance and murder of, I believe she was 17 or 18. Her name's Raina Rison. And she grew up the town next to mine, same county. And all I remember as a kid is that we would drive by this like vet office to go to 4-H. I was in 4-H at the time.
Oh my God, stop.
Yeah.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I didn't do anything with like farm stuff because I didn't live on a farm.
Isn't that what it's for?
It is. But do you know they have cake decorating? I did that.
What?
Oh yeah.
What is the 4-H's?
Hands, heart, health. Oh my God, everyone's yelling at me. That was in
Horticulture?
Maybe.
Oh, I'm just joking.
There's like a pledge. Herbs, hair. I don't know. Horse hands, heart. I can't remember. I'm gonna look it up.
Oh, what a bad 4-H member you were.
I mean, I was a terrible 4-H member, arguably at the time, and currently as an alum, not the best.
That's so funny.
So I did cake decorating, gift wrapping.
Oh,
That was one.
I mean, I would do those two things.
Are you ready for the next one?
What?
Clowning.
Shut the front door.
Have I never sent you a picture of me as a clown?
I am terrified of clowns.
Oh, I'll send it to you.
Oh, great.
And I wore glasses at the time, so I thought that was it's like makeup and glasses over the top and a wig.
Stop.
It's awesome.
So y'all have clown school in 4-H?
I don't know if they still do, but they did when I was in it.
I thought 4-H was like horses and farms. I just don't know what I was talking about.
I don't know if it's the same now, and maybe people listening who are involved with 4-H could let us know. But I think, again, like all things in the 90s, same as like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, I think they were trying to expand like what they offered to children. So like someone like me who didn't live on a farm, well, normally you would think I could do 4-H, but I could do gift wrapping and clowning.
Well, listen, people who live on farms need some clowns and cake in their life.
And I did dog training because I had a dog.
Now that checks.
My dog was terrible, so bad. Like the thing is, I love dogs, but I don't love like training dogs.
Oh no, that's a pain in the booty.
And so like I just loved my dog so much. Like they'd be like, you need to make him stay there and you can't give him a treat. And I'd be like, this is stupid. Like, I'm not doing that. Let me do clowning instead.
Oh my God.
Anyhow, when I would be driving to the fairgrounds for my 4-H classes, we would drive by this vet office. And all I remember as a 12 or 13-year-old-ish. Oh, I forgot to tighten that for you.
I know. My microphone
How's it doing?
Went wonky. It's okay, everyone.
It's okay.
Oh, we're gonna make it work. It's okay. Keep going.
Okay. And there would be like on their sign out front, like the letter boards, and it would say, "Come home, Raina." It would like have her name. And then I remembered seeing posters just around town of her and her face. And of course she was like a teen and young looking. I remember she had like curly, like that mid-90s kind of curly, crunchy perm hair. Yeah. And I remember I asked my parents about it once. I was like, what's happening? Like, why is she like, what's her deal? Because I was old enough to kind of understand. And they were like, oh, don't worry about that. That like doesn't have anything to do with you. Oh. So what's interesting is I was listening to a true crime episode and it wasn't about her, but one of the hosts said, oh, it reminds me of that Raina Rising case. The instant she said the name and then they kept going with whatever they were talking about, I was like, oh my God. It was like my memories just unlocked because I've been like listening to true crime and hadn't even thought about her. And I was like, she just said that name of that person that was missing when I was a kid. So again, I might do a full episode, but because I kind of want to do it so that I could get your thoughts because they do have someone in jail for it, but it's kind of questionable if it's the right person.
Oh, no.
So I ended up finding a full episode that someone did, the Crime and Coffee couple, who I love. They're like one of my favorite podcasts. They did a really good episode on it. I'll link in the show notes. And so because all I remembered was that I was like, well, whatever happened, And so they told the full story. But again, it's like, did this person do it? Did they not? Is it this other person? Is it someone totally else? So that was kind of something that happened in the 90s to me. So I may do a full episode on her because I might need to and do some of my own research.
You know what? I have listened to one true crime podcast ever. It was Serial, the first
Serial
season of Serial. I did listen to. I was like hooked.
Mm-hmm. That was a good podcast
because man, I still have thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
But
that if you could ever bring yourself to do it, the second season of that, I think it's the second season, could be the third. It's about a young Muslim woman who went missing.
Oh no, I haven't. I listened to another like they did like a spinoff.
Mm-hmm.
It was called. It was like a small town situation.
Okay, I've heard of that. I don't think I've listened to that one. Yes. Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
It's called Shit Town.
I think that's what it was
called. I don't think I listened to that one though.
Those were the only time. And then that was it. But anyway, as you were saying that, it was making me remember like a young girl like it. Yeah. Anyway.
So maybe
that was in your hometown. That was girl. And you remember.
And I remember, and it was crazy. As soon as they said the name, I'm just like cleaning my house, listening to a podcast. And I was like, oh my God, it happened, didn't it?
Mhm.
And my brain's like, whatever happened? Did someone get arrested? I didn't even remember her body being found, which
Oh.
I feel like back in the day I probably would have heard that somewhere, but I don't remember it.
Mhm.
So anyway, we may do a full episode on that, but not today or next week. But we're gonna shift gears now to the 5 cases that I brought for you today.
5.
But of course, all of them could have like their own episodes. So
Sure,
we're just going
of
to touch.
course.
And most of these, like if you're listening and you're a Xennial, you probably will know a lot of these anyway, people. So I'm not going to get too in the weeds. But I have 2 celebrity cases.
I already know one
Can
of
you
them.
guess what they might be?
One is O.J. Simpson.
Yep.
Let's see, we're in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, that's all I got.
It's a little later, 97, the murder of Gianni Versace.
Oh,
Got that one too.
did you ever watch that movie?
I never did.
I didn't either.
I bet it's good though. I heard it's really good.
Okay.
Okay, so OJ, if you are younger and listening, or just like need a quick refresher, this was in 94 through 95, and this was the unfortunate double homicide of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, and they were murdered on June 12th, 1994. OJ Simpson was Nicole Brown Simpson's ex-husband. He is a former football star, and he was arrested after this now infamous low-speed chase in a white Bronco.
Yeah, I remember watching that on the TV.
It
went on for a long time.
I was gonna say, I feel like it went on forever.
Did it say in the research?
I didn't look. Maybe we'll look that up. But it was probably like 5 minutes. No, I think it was at least an hour.
It was a while.
So while you look that up, his trial captivated the public, right? Like people watched an entire. It was televised.
It was 90 minutes. It lasted.
Oh wow! Okay, so that is long.
But that's weird because it says it's this doesn't make sense. AI, are you ready? Sorry,
let's do it.
It says this is why I don't like AI, because it doesn't make sense sometimes. It says the O.J. Simpson car chase lasted about 90 minutes, and then it says from 8:30 a.m. until 8 p.m.
What?
That's not 90 minutes, everyone.
Hello? And it was not that long. It was not 12 hours.
I don't know. I mean, I know it went on for a long time, but
weird.
It was 90 minutes.
Okay.
But I don't. Yeah. Because a lot of, but it just says he was arrested 8:30 a.m. Simpson's lawyers notified 8 p.m. he was arrested. So I don't know. Somewhere in there.
I wonder, I don't quite remember, but I wonder if he was notified in the morning, and then when he like left his house maybe around then, and they followed him.
Yeah.
And then like
and he wasn't driving. He wasn't driving the car. He had a driver, sorry.
Correct.
But we'll probably talk about some of that stuff. But
yeah.
And it wasn't a high speed. That was the weirdest thing to watch on TV. He wasn't like flying, the driver wasn't speeding.
He just wouldn't pull over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
And so when he was arrested, his trial captivated the public. It was televised again. I remember like my parents having it on. I think I was in 8th grade when the verdict was read. And I went to a private school.
Yeah,
and my teacher like pulled the TV, the rolling cart TV in the room, and we watched it. We watched the verdict. And he had these very high profile lawyers, including Johnny Cochran and Robert Shapiro. There was a lot of forensic evidence, like DNA testing, that was introduced, which a lot of the American public didn't really know how that worked before watching that. So everyone was very captivated. And it was an 8-month trial.
Yeah,
it's long. And the jury delivered a controversial not guilty verdict.
Yep.
And the whole thing of it, the whole celebrity football player, DNA, TV, these high profile lawyers of it all really was this media sensationalism in true crime.
Yeah.
Also raised a lot of issues about celebrity privilege,
right?
Race.
Oh, yeah.
Justice, violence against women. There was a lot of red flags of his behavior, whether you think he did it or not.
Yeah.
Leading up to those murders that were not addressed properly by law enforcement, by partly because maybe the correct laws weren't in place, but also partly because of his celebrity.
Well, and there's, I know, a lot of in the Black community as a whole, there was division on, is he guilty, is he not guilty? Because, you know, he is a Black man in the social justice system, and that is something you have to think about. Like, are you being wrongly accused? Are you not? And I remember that distinctly during that case and the discussion around it. And I remember watching the case. I mean, like you said, you watched it at school. I remember discussing it in school because he was a football player. You know, he was this famous football player. He had been like had some cameos in some movies, you know, like, and I remember I think I was taking like a law studies class or something like that and talking about evidence.
Yep.
And then the question of planting evidence.
Right.
All those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't even know if we can like state accurately what a big deal it was and how many cans of worms it opened up.
Yeah, and I mean, in the tragedy of the violent way these two individuals, human beings, died was awful. I mean, it was absolutely terrible. And I mean, they died very violently, and
well, yeah, and again, every person's life is important, but you know, she was a mother.
Yeah.
Like they had families. Like, you know, you think about, as you mentioned last episode, the humanity of it. You know, I even said the O.J. Simpson case instead of the murders of.
Yeah.
Like I probably should have said that because that's actually what it is.
Right.
But you know, when we think about it, we say, oh yeah, that O.J. Simpson trial, the O.J. Simpson case. Yeah. But it's really a case about two people who were violently murdered.
And it's so strange, like sitting here talking about it and remembering, and even now, like all the like satire that was made.
Yeah.
That's still, still like to this day, and the catchphrases, and like that makes my stomach churn a bit because I feel like I get it, like everything is going to be satire, whatever. But like, I wonder how those two individuals' families feel.
Right.
Like, it's not funny.
It's not.
Whether he's guilty or not guilty, these are two people who, you know, died in a horrible way. And I don't know. And that's while you were talking, I was remembering like the SNL skits and the t-shirts people would wear and the radio jokes and like, you know.
Yeah.
And even he passed away, didn't he? In recent years.
Yes.
But I mean, even he had made jokes in his later life.
Yeah. I mean, he eventually, the families sued him in civil court.
Correct.
And he lost that case. Right. So the difference there is he wasn't in prison, but he had to pay them. And basically the civil court said he was guilty based on the evidence. So like, you did this, so you need to make reparations. But because it was civil court. So essentially he was found guilty in one court. It's just not the court that would have put him in prison. Yeah. So there's that one. That's arguably the biggest one. Well, I've got a few more on here. I don't know. Arguably the biggest one of the 90s. And then the murder of Gianni Versace in 97. So he was a world famous fashion designer. He was killed on July 15th, 1997, which is interesting because that's around the time Princess Di passed away. Yeah. I don't know if you died in August. Yeah, like that summer they both passed away. And he was actually gunned down on the steps of his Miami Beach mansion by Andrew Cunanan, who was a spree killer, who was on the FBI's most wanted list. So, like, he was just, like, on a spree anyway, killing other people.
Why did I think he was hired by someone?
I don't know.
I'm getting this mixed up.
It says his motives still remain unclear. He had murdered 4 other men before killing Versace, although he had connections to all of them. The ones he murdered were former lovers and people he knew. They don't know that he knew Versace, other than Cunanan was in the gay community, and so was Versace. So, you know, it's possible they knew each other, or he was just lashing out in general. for whatever reason. And Cunanan actually killed himself before he could be taken into custody. And it was very shocking. And later dramatized in the assassination of Gianni Versace, an American crime story.
Mm-hmm.
So very sad. Just like, especially, I mean, obviously it's sad if you know someone that kills you, but especially if like there was no connection there whatsoever. You're literally just on the steps of your house, like going somewhere.
I feel like there's more to the story, maybe.
There's got to, and I will link to some podcasts that have bigger stories. There's a lot of theories surrounding this one for sure. And unfortunately, since Cunanan took his own life, it's at least if people are arrested and in jail and that sort of thing, there's a chance that you get more of the story over time, that their cellmate talks, that you can kind of piece stuff together, but that those stories often end, those people are gone. So those are two big celebrity ones. So we also saw a big public fascination, and I hate saying that word, but with crimes involving children. Particularly from a media perspective, white children from quote unquote good families.
Yeah.
So I have two cases that align with that. Do you know what they might be?
Menendez brothers.
I actually don't have that one on.
What?
I know. I tricked you. Although we didn't need to talk about them. So maybe we will in this section. We'll talk about them.
Is it the young man, the movie Boys Don't Cry was made?
No.
The young...
I know who you're talking about, though.
Brandon... Oh, what's his name? Okay, so not that one. Gosh, wow. Ugh, this is making my stomach hurt that I'm remembering all these.
So both of these happened in 1996.
Okay.
The first one, which is the lesser known of the two I have here, is the disappearance of Kristen Smart. Do you know this story?
No, I don't think so. Maybe I will.
So in 1996, Kristen Smart was a 19-year-old college student that went to California Polytechnic State University, and she disappeared. She was last seen walking back to her dorm with fellow student Paul Flores, who did become the primary suspect, but was never arrested at the time due to a lack of evidence. She's never reappeared, and her body's never been found. In 2021, so this case was like a media sensation and then just went cold. Flores, the guy she was seen with, was finally arrested.
What?
Yes, they had enough evidence and forensic evidence, and he was convicted of her murder.
Wow.
Without a body. So you got to have a lot of evidence to be able to do that. He was sent, but listen to this sentence. 25 years in prison. He's not eligible for probation, but he'll be eligible for parole in 15 years. So essentially he could do 15 years for killing her. All I can think is that maybe he pled to a lesser count. I don't have that here. Like
maybe
instead of
time, does the time account?
There's no statute of limitations for homicide.
Okay.
Like anywhere in the US. But I'm wondering if maybe he pled to like third degree murder, right? Which is not as bad as premeditated. Like maybe there was some sort of like, or manslaughter or something like that. Although it does say he was convicted of murder. So he's in jail for now. What came out of that was a lot of impact on campus safety, in general. I know I went to college not long after that, and so did you.
Yeah.
I don't remember much about my college's safety, but I know they did have like decent amount of lighting, different places, different emergency phones you could get to. There was just a big push for like young women not to go anywhere on their own, women in general. Don't go on a run in the dark by yourself, all things we should be able to do, P.S. But there was a big, like, protect yourself. I remember my sorority had a woman come talk and, like, sold us, like, handheld, like, mace and pepper spray.
Yeah, I think we had something like that, too.
Yeah, which, was going on before this, but it highlighted that. But then it also, this has been, the reason this case has sort of had staying power is because of the way it was a cold case for so long and then was revived.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder that these things can still be solved. especially nowadays,
Yeah.
20, 30, 40, sometimes even 50 years.
So
later.
how did he get caught?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't have that here. I definitely listen to podcasts about it, but they kind of all blend together. I think it was just a combination of evidence and they finally felt confident enough, but I don't know.
So how does that work? Do they just have somebody who never stops working on the case?
Not always.
Because like then, you know what I mean?
So a cold case is a case that's not being worked on.
So when did they decide to stop?
It depends on the case. But like an active case is one that's being worked on, even if it's 20 or 30 years old. And it can go cold and then it can go active again. So sometimes what will happen is, for example, new investigators are hired and they'll decide to revisit cold cases. And maybe they'll see something or they'll be like, I'm going to like take a couple days and just see what I can figure out. It becomes active again. So that's how that works. I don't know if there's like a time span when something goes cold. I think it varies, but generally if there's no leads, there's nothing else to run down, it just sits. Which you can imagine if you're a family member, how frustrating that must be.
Jeez, I can't imagine how, but like, what is wrong with you?
I kind of get the police perspective
right
too.
Oh, sure.
Because there's people all the time who need the resources. So a lot of families, if they have the means or these grassroots organizations that help raise money, will just hire private investigators. And often cold cases get moving because of that.
Right.
Because these investigators know how to petition for public records and sometimes even entire case files, and they can run things down. But you've got to have the means for that to happen.
Right.
Yeah,
of course.
Okay, so then the other one I had in this kind of category happened in 96 is the Jean Benet Ramsey case.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, we can just gloss over this.
I don't like
but this is a little 6-year-old girl who was found dead in her family's home the day after Christmas in 1996. And it became sort of this media circus. There was like this weird ransom note asking for $118,000. But then like people thought that the parents were acting odd, which just as an aside, like all people handle trauma and crisis and grief differently.
Yeah.
There's not like one way that looks, but just some of this sort of sense of non-urgency. The crime scene had been very contaminated before like they waited a while to call.
Yeah.
Like it was investigators that found her. The only reason they called was because they couldn't find her. And it was like a long time after they couldn't find her, like within a day, but still. And it was like an investigator that found her dead in the basement. Like it was all very odd. And there was no sign of forced entry. That was the other issue. So, this is a pretty wealthy family too. So it's not just like, you can pop their front door open and walk in. Like they had security systems, pretty secure home. Could a window have been unlocked somewhere? Maybe, possibly. But so anyway, despite years of investigation, no definitive suspect has ever been charged.
I was going to say, has ever been unsolved. And like that poor little child was like, there were signs of assault and stuff too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And she, it's worth saying, she was in the beauty pageant scene, which,
I have so many feelings on child pageants, but I won't, that's not the time or place to talk about it now.
Right. And I think that's another reason people were very quick to like blame her parents because even if they didn't physically hurt her, the fact that she was unsafe in this environment. Yeah. And there's an argument to be made there. I also think like if her parents really aren't involved in this, obviously they weren't maliciously like putting their child in pageants, so there's a lot of issues surrounding this for sure. Could it a lot of people just think it could have been someone like you could just back in the day, especially you could just walk into those pageants and sit and watch.
No.
Was it someone that followed her family home, figured out where she lived, could it have been a maintenance worker? Could it have nothing to do with pageants? Just like someone who came to work on the house and came back in later, it could be anything like that.
But it is interesting to me that they're a wealthy family. The parents are question mark suspects. And it's still never been solved.
Yeah.
when there's money and privilege involved, I don't know. I think
it's an odd one, right?
It's uneasy because money can get you out of a lot of things, which I hate, and I don't like that.
It's true though.
But it's true. It's a fact.
And I often wonder about this one, like if this is one that's going to be solved like in our lifetimes. I wonder.
But yeah, I remember her sweet little face all over.
Yeah. And people said like,
which that right there, I don't like. That is exploitation of not only a victim, but a child.
100%.
And I hate it. Like, that is gross.
Really gross. And the people who knew her, obviously her family, but even like people in the pageant circles or family friends said she was just vivacious and adorable and sweet and, you know, like all the things. That probably made her great at beauty pageants, you know, but she, you know, just again, never a good loss, but just like a big loss, I think, to the world.
I think this is also bringing race back into the picture. Another reason why it was so sensationalized is because she was this little white girl.
Blue eyes, in makeup, which people didn't like, but yeah.
Which is gross too, because would there have been as much sensationalism, exploitation, attention paid to the case if she wasn't this little white girl, right?
Yeah. There's no way. If she wasn't in beauty pageants, if she wasn't in makeup, if she wasn't wealthy or whatever. And you know, that's just another layer, right? Of who we were then, who we are now as a society. Yeah, the Menendez brothers, we can just touch on that. I don't have the years here or anything, but in a nutshell, right? Two brothers that killed their parents. Yeah. And they were very wealthy. There's a lot coming out about that now.
Oh, there is. There's a documentary, right?
Documentary. Their lawyers are petitioning because some new evidence has surfaced. But in a nutshell, essentially, they claim that they were, you know, sexually and physically abused by their father, potentially people their father knew as well, and that they just kind of, that their mother knew, and that's what, you know, so there's a lot of issues wrapped up in that.
And we actually got a message on our Insta from Desiree, one of our listeners, right?
Yes.
Who she's a true crime junkie like Katie.
Yeah.
And she was, I think that's what she was saying, that she was like, knows a lot of stuff about the Menendez brothers case, right?
I think she did say that. Yeah. So maybe we'll have her on.
Maybe we should.
That'd be great.
Maybe I should just let you that one out. I'm just kidding. I won't do that.
Maybe we'll give you a partial research.
I'm just kidding.
Not the crime itself, but
I want to say
Danny and Desiree. No, Danny.
And it was
on a special episode.
Oh yeah, because she said she did. Desiree, our devoted listener, she said she's most knowledgeable about the Menendez brothers. She's even in a Discord server, which I don't know what that is. What is that, Katie?
Yeah, it's like just a messaging app.
Okay, I'm like,
yeah, just one of the.
She said that's run by Eric Menendez's wife.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a good reason I didn't put this on my list then, because we need a more filled out. We'll reach out to her after we're done recording.
And she said the Menendez brothers show was very unfactual.
Like the latest one? Okay. Good to know. So maybe instead of watching it, I'll just talk to her.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to have her back on, but maybe we'll take a little true crime rest.
Yeah.
And then come back to it.
We will come back to it. That case is not going anywhere.
No.
We can wait on that one. And I've got one more here. Remember last time we talked about the Central Park 5?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's another one similar in the 90s, not boys of color, but young men who in the end ended up being wrongfully accused and imprisoned for something that they didn't do. Oh. Have you heard of the West Memphis 3? This was in 1993.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
So yes, 3 8-year-old boys were found murdered in a wooded area of West Memphis, Arkansas. And then 3 local teenagers, Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse McKelly, were arrested and convicted of the crime, largely based on a coerced confession from Miss Kelly, who was younger and who, he's neurodivergent. So he had, some issues there, and was like questioned without a parent, without a lawyer. And again, the police were just so thirsty to close it that they were all convicted basically on this kid's confession, which he later recanted.
Oh, man.
Same kind of thing. He just wanted to get home. They told him, you can go home after you, whatever. And the boys were like, also accused of occult practices.
I do remember this.
Not, not any more than any teenager in 1993, like wearing black.
Oh, geez.
Black nail polish, like stuff like that. Even if they were like quote unquote practicing witchcraft, that doesn't mean that you murdered 3 little kids.
Let's go on to, there's so much misunderstanding anyway with what that actually means.
Absolutely.
So I hate that.
So after they were convicted, the public opinion actually started to shift.
Oh, really?
Suspecting that the teens had been scapegoated. And then after new DNA evidence emerged, they were released in 2011.
How long were they in jail?
So they were in there 15 or 16 years.
Okay. This kind of thing is so bothersome to me.
Yep.
And if you don't think we have a problem in our criminal justice system, because this is not like this is rare, this happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
People are wrongfully accused, wrongfully convicted, and then our prison system is set up not to rehab people, like we said, but it scars them and abuses them. And so by the time they were children, children, and spent 15 or 16 years of their young lives, have been now traumatized, completely changed, and now it doesn't matter if they're like, oh, well, now your record's clean. Okay, but my whole identity and self has now been affected and
Absolutely.
changed.
And look, even with that evidence, this part's really messed up. They had to get out. They had to enter an Alford plea. An Alford plea is them saying, we are innocent, but we admit that you have enough evidence to convict us.
What?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of that before?
No.
It's almost a way of like making the state look better or something for them, which is just like so
okay.
But then you get out of prison, so
but no, because here's my thing too. When people are wrongly convicted, is there any repercussions for the officers who?
Sometimes.
Okay.
But there's nothing standardized.
See? And
you can sue for reparations, which usually you're granted. So there can be financial reparation, which again, I know no amount of money can add up to freedom and safety and all of that. But you can file civil lawsuits, and most of the time you'll get something from that.
But then that places the responsibility on the person who is wrongly accused.
It does. It's not automatic.
So that's what I was like, what?
Yeah. And it really depends state by state too.
Yeah.
Like I have heard of cases where the state preemptively offers a financial whatever, but it's not required.
And then meanwhile, the officers who participated in that coercion confession just get off scot-free.
Sometimes not. Sometimes they are, it's one of those things where it's like, can you prove that they acted with ill will? Like, how do you prove that?
Well, there should be some kind of behavioral standards of, well, you had a minor in a room without a parent or a lawyer present. Right. For how long? That shouldn't happen.
Correct. Those are things that have to be reformed.
Correct.
And some of them have.
Why is that even a thing? Why we shouldn't that should just be.
Right. You shouldn't have to ask for that. Yeah. You shouldn't have to, especially a child, shouldn't have to be like, I need a parent here or I need a lawyer here.
Correct.
Right. I agree. And, now there's a lot of like recorded interviewing and things like that, which wasn't as commonplace back then. But even now, even current cases, like I'll listen to the tapes disappear. Oh, we didn't hit the right button.
Or they wait to start recording.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They record later and they say, oh, but they said all this first. Right. And so no one is in jail for this murder right now. But there are a lot of theories around this one, but some think it was actually the stepfather of one of the murdered boys who had shown a violent temper before. Other people think that the boys stumbled upon a drug deal in the woods and that those people killed them. Some theories think the stepfather's part of the drug deal. So he's never been like arrested or whatever. I think he was questioned. I mean, all their family members were questioned, but no conviction there. And at this point, so much time has passed. And like, there's not much evidence left to speak of that, like, the odds of really finding the real person that did this are pretty slim.
God.
Yeah, it's awful. Kind of like we said with the Central Park Five, there's at least one in that group of three who is actively like trying to reform the criminal justice system and all of that. I think it was the youngest one who already had issues, like it's just physical issues, mental issues, like just not good. So yeah, to your point, that is all I have. So now that we have made it through our true crime of the 80s and 90s, Danny, what are your thoughts, my friend?
I still do not enjoy this. Like it and it's not that I'm trying, like, listen, folks, if you've been listening, you know this. It's not that I need to see the world through a pair of rose-colored glasses. Like, I am a realist, but that's why it's so hard for me, is because I also am like an anxiety-ridden person. So I don't need extra things to have me worried about. Not that I'm not trying to pretend like that stuff's not happening. It's just I get so upset about it that I just don't like it.
I think I mentioned on the last episode, I really have trouble listening to anything that has to do with children.
Yeah.
I did listen to like a 3-part series on the West Memphis 3 on Morbid. I know, I listened to it over time and listened to musicals in between. And I'm glad I did, because it really delved into a lot of the issues and the problems, but it was very hard to listen to. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard, but I commend you for sitting through this with me.
Yeah.
We are going to have a lighter-hearted episode for you guys, so make sure if you're listening, you check for that too. And we have like 50 plus other, maybe 60 plus at this point, other episodes that, if you listen to this when you're looking for something lighthearted, maybe don't listen to Diet Culture.
Yeah.
But maybe not even Britney Spears. It's a little sad. But you could listen to Pagers. You could do Candy Taste Testing, cartoons, part 1 and 2.
Yay! That's what I bring to the table.
If you want to like show Danny some support, give her episodes on cartoons a little bump. Because they're really popular anyway, but make her feel good, because she's been through a lot these last 2 weeks with me, you guys. A lot.
It's okay, because Katie's been such a good, not only have we done cartoons, we have done all like toys and other stuff that Katie, video games, and Katie's been a trooper through it all. So I can suck it up for true crime. All right. So anyway, thanks everybody for listening to us here on Generation In Between, a Xennial Podcast where you never know what's going to happen. If you loved our show, leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. And like Katie said, go listen to some more episodes. And if you have time, leave a review, because those really, really, really help us. And you can also leave little comments about each episode on Spotify, which helps other people see us and decide to listen to us too. So don't forget, you can join us for $8 over on Patreon. We love you guys so much, our listeners and our patrons. You'll get bonus content, fun stuff. And until next time, everyone, just please don't commit crimes, like, ever. Okay? Great.
Bye, guys.
Bye. need readers. When I don't have my contacts in, I
Yeah.
can see better up close. Isn't that weird?
I know, I'm the same way.
So I need readers for when I'm wearing my contacts. And then when I'm wearing my glasses. That was good.